The dinner table sat untouched. 6 plates, a cooling roast, and silence thick enough to choke on. On the kitchen counter, a handwritten note rested beside a wedding ring. Michael Harper stood frozen in the doorway of their Boston suburban home, reading the same 3 sentences over and over, as if repetition might change their meaning. Upstairs, 4 children slept. They didn't know yet. They didn't know their mother had chosen herself over them. The zipper sounded like a gunshot in the quiet bedroom. Michael watched Victoria smooth down her trench coat. She looked perfect. Even now, while dismantling their life, not a hair was out of place. "You're not waiting for them to wake up?" His voice came out hollow. She checked her reflection in the vanity mirror, applying lipstick. "If I wait, I'll never leave. And if I don't leave, I'll die in this house. We have 4 kids, Vicky. Ethan is 10. The twins are 5. Stepped closer. You're not suffocating. You're parenting." She spun around, eyes flashing. "I'm drowning. It's drowning in laundry and packed. It's lunches and your student loans and this ... mediocrity. I signed up for the brilliant scientist who was going to change the world. Instead, I got a tired man who smells like chemicals and failure." Michael flinched, but held his ground. "We're building something. It takes time. I don't have time." She grabbed her suitcase. "Derek is waiting." The name hung in the air. Derek Sterling, real estate developer who'd been mentoring her transition into luxury sales. The man with the Bentley and the penthouse. "So that's it," Michael said, a bitter laugh escaping. "Trading us in like a used car." "I'm choosing survival." She walked past him, pausing at the door. "The kids are resilient. They'll adjust better than I ever could. They're not furniture, Vicky." His hands clenched into fists. "You walk out that door, you don't come back, you understand? You don't. Get to pop in for Christmas when it's convenient." She offered a tight smile. "I think that's best for everyone." She walked down the hallway. Michael followed on leaden legs. He watched from the top of the stairs as she opened the front door. A gust of freezing wind blew in, swirling snow onto the mat. She didn't look up toward the bedrooms where her children slept. She didn't ask to kiss Ethan, Ryan, Sophie, or Emma. Goodbye. She simply stepped out into the night. Michael stood there long after the taillights disappeared. The clock read 8:42 p.m. A floorboard creaked behind him. Ethan, his 10-year-old, was standing at the railing in flannel pajamas, clutching a comic book. His eyes were wide, intelligent, and far too old for his face. "Dad? Was that Mom?" Michael felt his heart shatter. He walked up and knelt to eye level. "Yeah, buddy. Is she coming back?" Michael looked at the empty space where his wife used to be, then back at the boy who needed him to be a mountain, not a man. "No, Ethan, she's not." He pulled his son into a hug so tight he hoped it would hold them both together. The sun rose with cruel, indifferent brightness. Michael hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in the living room chair, staring at the door, waiting for a key that never turned. "Daddy, I can't find my blue hair tie." Sophie wailed from upstairs. "And Emma's wearing my socks." Ryan shouted. Michael stood by the kitchen counter staring at 4 lunchboxes. Victoria had a system. Bento boxes with perfectly cut fruit. He stared at the loaf of bread and peanut butter in his hands, wondering how she got the crusts off so perfectly. He was a scientist dealing with complex cellular regeneration, yet he couldn't figure out elementary school lunches. By 7:15, the 4 children sat eating slightly burnt toast and lumpy oatmeal. Ethan ate with his head down, refusing to look at the empty chair. "Where's Mommy?" Emma asked, swinging her legs. "Is she sleeping?" Michael froze, coffee pot hovering. He met Ethan's eyes. The 10-year-old gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent pact between the men of the house. Mommy had to go away for a while, for work. "She didn't say goodbye," Ryan whispered. It was sudden. Michael turned away to hide his eyes. Backpacks. Bus in 10 minutes. As the chaos of coats ensued, his phone buzzed. A banking notification. He needed to transfer funds for the mortgage. He tapped the savings tab. $0 stared back at him. He refreshed. Checked the transaction history. A wire transfer. Yesterday at 4 p.m. to Victoria Harper's personal account. She hadn't just left. She had liquidated them. 12 years of savings. The emergency fund. The kids' braces money. Gone. Add the bus. I then yelled. Michael looked up, phone trembling. The mortgage was due in 3 days. He had $400 for children to feed, and a wife who had surgically removed his ability to keep a roof over their heads. He looked at his children, clean, fed, oblivious to the cliff they were standing on. Go. Have a great day. I love you guys. The door slammed. Michael gripped the counter, knuckles white. As the first wave of true panic crashed over him, 6 months passed like winter had taken. Permanent residence inside the Harper house. Spring thaw arrived in Boston, turning snow to gray slush. But inside, the air stayed frozen with anxiety. Michael sat on a stool in the converted garage. His sanctuary turned storage unit. Around him hummed the components of his life's work centrifuge. Microscope, notebooks filled with formulas for synthetic tissue regeneration. Next to the microscopes sat a cardboard box marked Sell. The bank had called 3 times this week. Victoria's exit tax had left a crater he couldn't fill on a junior. Researcher's salary. He had a job offer foreman at a chemical plant in New Hampshire. Grueling, mindless work, but it paid 40% more than his research grant. It would save the house. It would kill his soul. He reached for the microscope, hand shaking. You're putting it in the wrong box? Michael jumped. Ethan stood in the doorway. The boy had grown these 6 months, shoulders broadening, eyes losing the softness of childhood. He wore a shirt that was slightly too small. Hey, bud, didn't hear you come. In, Ethan stepped into the cold garage, looking at the box marked Sell, then at the equipment. He didn't look like a child. He looked like a weary partner. You're selling the scope? We need the cash, the mortgage, ... Michael sighed. I'm thinking about that plant job. Better money. Home by 6 every night, but you hate that work. Said it's for people who stopped asking questions. Sometimes asking questions doesn't pay the heating bill, Michael snapped, then immediately regretted it. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do what's right for us. Ethan walked to the workbench, running a finger along the spine of a research journal. Mom left because she said you were dreaming. She said you were chasing something that wasn't real.
Michael?
Looked at his hands. Maybe she was right. If you sell this, Ethan said, turning with fierce, unblinking eyes, then she is right. You prove her right. Michael stared at his son. I can help with Ryan and the twins, Ethan continued, voice gaining strength. I can make lunches. Learn to do laundry better. We don't need new sneakers. We don't need pizza nights. But we need you to do this. He tapped the notebook. Because if you stop, then everything fell apart for nothing. The silence stretched. Heavy and profound, Michael stood. Something hot and painful surged in his chest. He reached out and closed the cardboard box. You're not selling it? Ethan asked. No. Shoved it under the workbench. We're going to be broke. I'm tired. It's going to be really hard. I don't care. Squeezed his son's shoulder. Go inside. Start homework. We've got work to do. As Ethan walked back into the house, Michael sat down and opened his notebook to a blank page. He wasn't doing this for the Nobel Prize anymore. He wasn't doing it for money. He was doing it because his 10-year-old son had just given him permission. To be great, 3 years turned the garage into a fortress of science. The smell of oil had been replaced by ozone and alcohol. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, monitors glowing against Michael's tired face. On the workbench, midst the tangle of wires and petri dishes, lay a copy of Boston's social magazine. Sophie, now 8, had brought it home from a friend's house, innocent. Of the damage it could inflict, Michael shouldn't have looked. But he had. Page 42. The sterling power couple. There was Victoria, wearing a silver gown that likely cost more than his car. Holding champagne, laughing at something Derek was whispering. Caption read, Victoria Sterling on the art of reinvention and finding true happiness. She looked younger than 3 years ago. Stress lines smoothed away by money and the absence of 4 children who needed homework help and emotional support. She hadn't called for the twins' 8th birthday last week, Generic card had arrived 3 days late. Reinvention, Michael muttered. 3 years turned the garage into a fortress of science. The smell of oil had been replaced by ozone and alcohol. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, monitors glowing against Michael's tired face. On the workbench, midst the tangle of wires and petri dishes, lay a copy of Boston's social magazine. Sophie, now 8, had brought it home from a friend's house, innocent of the damage it could inflict. Michael shouldn't have looked, but he had. Page 42. The Sterling Power couple. There was Victoria, wearing a silver gown that likely cost more than his car, holding champagne, laughing at something Derek was whispering. The caption read, "Victoria Sterling on the art of reinvention and finding true happiness." She looked younger than 3 years ago. Stress lines smoothed away by money in the absence of 4 children who needed homework help and emotional support. She hadn't called for the twins' 8th birthday last week. A generic card had arrived 3 days late. Reinvention, Michael muttered. He turned back to the incubator, sighed. Sample 89B was undergoing a critical bonding phase. For 3 years, he'd been trying to get synthetic polymers to mimic human skin without being rejected by organic cells. Every attempt failed. The matrix always collapsed after 4 hours. He watched the timer. 3 hours, 59 minutes and 50 seconds. 10 seconds until the usual collapse. Michael held his breath. 4 o'clock. He leaned in. Usually the solution would turn cloudy, a sign of rejection. The liquid remained clear. The suspension was holding. He typed a command, bringing up the microscopic feed. The lattice structure wasn't breaking down. It was weaving, growing. The synthetic cells were accepting the biological scaffold. 405, my God, he whispered. He didn't cheer. The feeling wasn't excitement. It was relief so profound it felt like physical pain leaving his body. He slumped back, then looked at the magazine. At Victoria's perfect airbrush smile, she had left him because she thought he was a dead end. She had bet against him. Michael dropped the magazine into the waste bin. Right on top of failed experiments, he walked upstairs, peering into rooms. Ethan's lanky frame sprawled across the bed. Ryan's chaotic pile of blankets. The twins in there. Bunk beds. They didn't know yet. They didn't know the clear liquid in the garage below was about to change everything. They didn't know their father had just solved a puzzle that major pharmaceutical companies had been failing at for a decade. Michael leaned against the doorframe, listening to their breathing. He wasn't the man who smelled like failure anymore. The boardroom on the 45th floor offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. Michael sat at the mahogany table, hands clasped to hide the tremor. His best suit was 3 years old, cuffs fraying. Across from him sat Robert Vance, a venture capitalist, known for eating startups for breakfast. He flipped through the dossier on Harper Dynamics, the name Michael had trademarked the night after the breakthrough. Synthetic tissue regeneration with 0 rejection rate, Vance murmured. Sounds like science fiction. It's biology. And it works. Vance closed the folder, removed his glasses, and studied Michael. The silence stretched. Michael thought of the foreclosure notices hidden in his desk. Ethan wearing sneakers with holes. The twins sharing a single Happy Meal because they weren't that hungry. I did see the data, Vance said finally. Verified it. He slid a paper across the table, a term sheet. Michael looked at the number at the bottom. Seed investment. $5 million. The air left the room, enough to pay off the mortgage 10 times over. College funds. Freedom. There's a condition, Vance said. Move the operation to a proper facility. Hire a CEO. You stick to science. Up the pen. I'll hire a CEO eventually. But right now I run it, and I don't work weekends. Weekends are for my kids. Vance raised an eyebrow. This is a billion-dollar industry. You don't get weekends. Then keep your money, Michael pushed. The paperback? I lost my marriage to this work. I won't lose my children. Vance stared, surprised by the steel in this man's eyes. Integrity, Vance said slowly. Rare. All right. Run it your way. Just make me money, Michael signed. An hour later, he walked out into the wind on Atlantic Avenue. For the first time in For years, it didn't feel cold. It felt fresh. He drove the beat-up sedan home. When he pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same, shingles missing, lawn overgrown. But it looked different to him. It was no longer a prison of debt. It was safe. He opened the front door. The smell of burning pasta greeted him. "Dad?" Emma ran into the hallway. Ryan tried to cook and he melted the spoon. Michael walked into the smoky kitchen. Ryan frantically waved a towel. Ethan scraped charred remains off the stove. They froze when they saw him. "Did they like it?" Ethan asked softly. Michael looked at his 4 children. Ragged, tired, growing up too fast in the shadow of his struggle. "They loved it," he said, voice choking. "Pack your bags. We're having dinner at a restaurant. With waiters? Can we get appetizers?" Sophie's eyes widened. "And get anything you want." Ethan didn't cheer. He just walked over and leaned his forehead against Michael's shoulder, a gesture of relief. So heavy it nearly knocked him over. They had climbed out of the pit. The dirt was finally off their hands. The silence in the penthouse on the 42nd floor was different from the suburban bungalow she'd left 7 years ago. That silence had been heavy with resentments and diapers. This silence was expensive. Smelled of lilies and chilled wine. Victoria Sterling sat on her Italian leather sofa. City lights sprawled beneath her. She was 44 now. Skin still taut thanks to fillers that cost more than a Honda Civic. But her eyes held a restless, hungry quality. Her phone showed no messages from Derek. He was closing a deal in New York. That was the official story. But she'd seen the credit card statement, a charge for a bracelet at Cartier. She hadn't received a bracelet. She took a sip of wine. She'd traded affection for security, chaos for order. She wasn't drowning in laundry anymore, but freedom she was discovering was incredibly boring. On a whim, she opened her tablet and typed the name she hadn't spoken in years. Michael Harper. She expected nothing, maybe an obituary or a mugshot. A few academic citations loaded. LinkedIn profile with no photo, no Facebook, no Instagram. Still a ghost. Former associate researcher, she read. He quit or got fired. Imagined him still in that drafty house, renting out rooms. Children would be teenagers now. Ethan would be 15. She tried to picture his face, but the image was blurry. She told herself they were better off. She'd done them a favor by leaving. She scrolled further. No mention of a new wife. No photos of a replacement mom. "He's alone," she whispered. If Michael was struggling, then she was the winner. She was in the penthouse. She hadn't made a mistake. The elevator chimed. Derek walked in, smelling of airplane air and someone else's perfume. He walked straight to the bar without looking at her. How was New York long? He didn't ask about her day. He didn't notice her new dress. He didn't offer the Cartier bracelet. Anna looked at the back of his head. Hatred flaring before she tamped it down. She had no idea that at that exact moment, 20 miles north, Michael was signing blueprints for a $40 million research campus. While Dr. Sarah Mitchell laughed at his joke, her hand resting comfortably on his arm. The invitation was printed on heavy cream cardstock with gold leaf lettering. The inaugural Harper Dynamics Charity Gala. Ticket price. $5,000 per plate. Victoria stared at the credit card receipt. It had been declined twice before going through on a card she kept hidden from Derek. Things with Derek had disintegrated from tense to hostile. His real estate empire was over-leveraged. Her commission checks were drying up as her network realized she was no longer the it girl. She needed a lifeline, a new client, a new investor, perhaps a new husband. Her eyes drifted to the invitation. Harper Dynamics. For a brief, terrifying second, a memory flashed. Michael in his stained lab coat, babbling about polymers. Then she laughed. Impossible. Michael Harper clipped coupons and drove a 10-year-old sedan. The idea that her Michael could be behind the city's biggest biotech was laughable. Harper was a common name. This CEO was probably some old money heir. She turned to the mirror, sucking in her stomach, zipping up the emerald gown. "You are Victoria Sterling," she whispered. "You are a survivor." She wasn't going to celebrate science. She was going to hunt. The Palmer House Hilton was chaotic and glamorous. Paparazzi flashes popped like lightning. Victoria stepped out, chin. Hi! The grand ballroom was breathtaking, a sea of tuxedos and gowns. The centerpiece was a massive holographic double helix spinning slowly. She grabbed champagne and scanned the room. The mayor, a tech billionaires, the elite she felt she belonged with. She didn't see the 4 young adults near the stage watching. The entrance, she didn't see the tall, broad-shouldered man in the bespoke tuxedo standing with his back to her, talking to a beautiful woman in red. She was safe here, anonymous in her glamour. She had no idea she'd just walked into a courtroom where the verdict was about to be read. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Victoria was charming, a silver-haired banker. But as the spotlight cut through darkness, he turned away attention. Commanded, "Here we go," he whispered. The man of the hour. Turned down a buyout from Pfizer last week. She felt irritated at being ignored, but turned toward the stage, composing polite interest. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Harper Dynamics. The announcer's voice boomed. The man rewriting the future of regenerative medicine, Mr. Michael Harper. Her glass stopped halfway to her lips. A man walked into the spotlight. Tall, tuxedo, with Italian precision, silver at the temples commanding. He walked with confident, easy stride, not the shuffle of the exhausted researcher she remembered. Victoria blinked. The room tilted. It was Michael. But not her. Michael, this man radiated power, his jawline sharper, eyes clearer. He looked magnificent. "No," she breathed, lost in thunderous applause. Not possible. She stepped back, unable to look away. Michael raised a hand. What? Thank you, he said, voice deep and steady. 12 years ago, I started this company in a garage with no heat. A microscope I almost sold for rent money, and a singular motivation. Victoria felt blood drained from her face. I was told I was a dreamer, that I was wasting my time, that I should choose a safer path. He paused, gaze sweeping the crowd. For one terrifying second, it seemed to land directly on her. But I had 4 reasons to keep going. 4 reasons who needed me to be more than I was. He gestured to the side. I'd like to introduce the heart of this family, my children. Hand flew to her mouth. From the wings, 4 young adults walked out. First, Ethan, tall, handsome, like a young movie star. Then Ryan, rugged, broad-shouldered. And the twins, Sophie and Emma, now 20 and 15, stunning designer gowns. Worn with effortless grace, they didn't look damaged. They looked like an impenetrable unit of strength. They took their places beside their father. Michael put his arm around Sophie. Ethan clapped Ryan's back. The image was perfect. They are the reason Harper Dynamics exists, Michael said. They are my greatest experiment and my greatest success. The applause was deafening. Victoria stood alone in the dark, clutching her empty glass.
Ow.
She'd walked out on a loser to find a better life. Now she watched that loser receive a standing ovation, flanked by the children she deemed burdens. Wasn't the one who had escaped, she was the one left behind. Victoria had finished her second champagne. Liquid courage settled her tremors and replaced shock with indignant entitlement. They were her children. Those were her jeans in those designer gowns. That was her husband, ex-husband, being toasted as a visionary. She smoothed her dress and began moving, cutting through the crowd like a shark. She stepped through the invisible force field around the Harper family. Michael. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. Michael froze.
Ow.
The smile didn't drop, it evaporated. Beside him, Sarah stiffened. Slowly, he turned. For the first time in 12 years, face to face, Victoria smiled tremulously. You were incredible up there, truly. Michael looked at her, the lines around her eyes, the desperation clinging to her like cheap cologne. He didn't look angry. Looked clinical. Victoria, I didn't know you were on the guest list. I had to come. She pivoted toward the twins, stepping forward. Sophie, Emma, my God, look at you. The reaction was instantaneous. Sophie and Emma didn't smile. They simultaneously took one synchronized step backward, shoulders together, defensive wall perfected in childhood. Hello, Victoria, Sophie said, ice cold. She didn't say mom. Victoria flinched, but recovered, turning to the boys. At Ethan, Ryan. You're so handsome. We're busy, Victoria. Ethan looked down with eyes holding none of the 10-year-old's confusion. Busy? She laughed breathlessly, reaching for his arm. I'm your mother. It's been so long, don't. Ryan stepped between her and his sisters. A single word, low and menacing. Don't touch us. The small circle had gone quiet. Victoria felt eyes on her. This wasn't how she'd rehearsed it. She looked. At Michael, eyes filling with tears. Michael, please. I made a mistake. I was young, overwhelmed. Don't turn them against me. I have a right to know my children. Michael looked at Sarah, then back. He took a sip of his drink. You relinquished your rights in a text message, Victoria. You didn't want to know them when. They were hungry. You don't get to know them now that they're full. I am their mother, she hissed. Are you? Ryan stepped forward, height intimidating. The jazz band trailed off. Silverware stopped clinking. All eyes fixed on their circle. I am your mother, Victoria repeated. You can't change biology. I gave you life. Ryan took a step closer, voice clinically detached. You gave us biology. You didn't give us life. Dad gave us life. Dad gave us food when there was no money. Dad gave us heat when the furnace broke. Dad gave us a future. I was overwhelmed. Tears spilled down her emerald gown. I was 22, didn't know how to handle 4 children. A husband who was ... who was a failure. A collective gasp rippled through onlookers. Michael moved forward protectively, but Ethan put a hand on his chest. Let him finish. This is our fight. Ryan didn't flinch at the insult. He actually smiled, cold, humorless. A failure. Oh, you left a man building a foundation because you were too impatient to wait for cement to dry. You didn't leave because he was failing. You left because you were selfish. You don't understand. Victoria sobbed, reaching for Sophie's hand. Sophie recoiled, tucking her hand into Sarah's arm. The rejection was physical and absolute. Do you remember the night you left? Ryan's voice dropped, because we do. I was 8. Ethan was 10. We sat by the window for 3 days waiting. Thought you went to the store. Thought you got lost. Victoria went pale. Ryan, stop. We stopped waiting about the time Dad sold his own blood plasma to buy us winter coats. We stopped waiting when we realized the only person who would die for us was the man you just called a failure. He gestured to the opulence. Surrounding them, you're here now because you see the cameras. The stock price, the gala, you want a return on an investment you sold 12 years ago? He leaned in, face inches from hers. But you don't have shares in this family anymore. You cashed out. You're not a mother. You're just a woman we used to know. Victoria staggered back, heel catching on carpet. She looked around for support, for someone to take her side. The elite of Boston, who prized loyalty above all else, stared. Back with disgust, she wasn't the victim. She was the villain who abandoned the hero. She looked at Michael one last time. He stood with his arm around Sarah, the woman who had actually raised her daughters. His face was calm. He didn't look at her with hate. He looked at her with nothing, and that was the final blow. Hate implies passion. Indifference implies she no longer existed. Please leave, Ryan said. You're ruining the party. 2 security guards materialized at her elbows. This way, ma'am. Victoria didn't fight. She allowed herself to be shepherded. Through the parting crowd, feeling 100 stares burning into her back, they reached the doors. The guard pushed one open, and winter wind rushed in. Have a good evening, ma'am. The door clicked shut with finality. Victoria stood on the sidewalk, shivering. The vintage gown that seemed stunning an hour ago now felt like a costume for a canceled play. She fumbled for her phone, dialed Derek. The number you have reached is not available. She lowered the phone. He'd blocked her. She wasn't going home to a partner who would comfort her. She was going home to a penthouse belonging to a man already looking for her placement. She had left a good man for a rich one. Now she had neither. Inside, the music had started again. Tension had evaporated. Michael looked at Ryan. The young man was trembling, adrenaline fading. Did I, double quotes, Ryan's voice cracked. Did I go too far? Michael pulled his son into a tight hug. No, you spoke the truth. And the truth is heavy. Ethan, Sophie, and Emma closed in, forming a tight circle. Sarah stepped in, to her hand on Sophie's shoulders. Sophie didn't pull away. She leaned into the touch. Let's get out of here, Michael said. I think we've had enough champagne for one lifetime. Pizza, Emma suggested, wiping a tear. Deep dish, Ethan agreed. They moved together toward the private exit, a phalanx of shared history and survival. Michael didn't look back. He didn't care about networking or stock prices. He looked at his children, the 4 lives he had carried. Through fire, they weren't broken. They were forged steel. And he looked at Sarah, the woman who saw the steel and loved them for it. They stepped into the night. The air felt crisp and clean. For 12 years, Michael had been holding his breath, waiting for the past to come back and claim what was his. It had come. It had seen, and it had been conquered. Come on, Michael said, opening the limo door. Let's go home. The car pulled away, merging into traffic, heading north toward the trees. Behind them, somewhere in the cold, Victoria stood alone watching. The golden glow of the hotel windows where the music played on without her.